Good evening, everyone. It looks like no one else is going to come, so we're going to get started. It's 6:17, and for those folks who are watching the recording, it is the first it's a snowy, wet night out there. So we have several folks, a couple people who are off the road and not coming, and other folks who just can't get here. So I think we should adapt the agenda some. Before we open it, let's go ahead and do some basic stuff that we usually do. We're going to open it for public comments, then do the minutes, and then why don't we talk about the agenda? Okay, and public comments are at the end as well. Okay. So Amy, as always, is passing around a piece of paper. We welcome you to speak, say where you're from, and what your name is, please. Would anyone like to speak now? Okay, Jody.
I'm not sure of the agenda. Jody Normando, do I have to stand tonight, or?
Whatever you want to do.
Jody Normando from Dummerston. I knew you have a few of the articles on the agenda tonight, and I don't know whether you are going to be discussing them or not. I do want to put in a pitch for the proportional membership. I think that's best for Dummerston. I would like to, somebody recommended it, or mentioned it one time, and it may be Inez, who unfortunately is with a very sick dad in the hospital down in Texas and can't be here, that you could waiver from the exact proportional bit by a little bit. So you might be able to make an 8-member board, which would be more equal to Brattleboro versus the smaller towns. The other one that you were looking at, I know we could have a chance of having more board members, but I think it really, in actuality, would be Brattleboro. So there would be a lot more Brattleboro board members. That was on the proportionality. What I was looking at here, and I'm concerned about, I have not seen the ballot as you're proposing, and it's not online, I don't think, is it? Okay, so if I could have a copy of that, would be great. The other thing that I would wonder if I could have a copy of is the separation agreement between Vernon and Brattleboro, seeing as they've already met with Vernon and Brattleboro. But on these articles, we went through with Leopold about which ones were board controlled and which ones were voting controlled. And Article 10 was not mentioned, at least in the minutes of that meeting. And Article 10 says, vote on the articles and the new board. So when we are voting, are the articles going to be there? And my concern is that I understood from Mr. Leopold that anything that was on the ballot would have to be revoted or to change by the electorate. Anything that was not on the ballot was a board thing. So, and then because Article 10 says this, I was just concerned about that. So those are the 1, 2, 3, 4 things that I want to mention tonight, at least at this point.
Okay. Several of the things you mentioned are on the agenda.
Yeah, well, and I forgot my agenda.
The ballot.
Can I just?
None of us have, yeah, go ahead.
Just respond to 10. The way I read 10, it's just like a one-time point.
Yeah.
The articles to create a unified school district will be submitted to the voters of each town on March 7th. So that's not a recurring article.
But it says that we vote on the articles.
Yeah, so.
And my interpretation is that we would have the articles there to vote on. And that's what Mr. Leopold said. If it wasn't on the ballot, then it was a school board decision. If it was on the
I'm not
ballot.
understanding you. This language is, the articles to create a unified district will be submitted to voters of each town
Yeah,
on March 7th.
the articles.
The candidates for the board, school director, will be elected on the same day as required by law. So, as I understand, he listed all the articles that would need voter approval to change. That one, to me, is a one-time article, so you wouldn't have that recurring.
I guess maybe we're getting involved in semantics or something here. We probably are. But because it says the articles to create the unified school district are to be voted on, these are the articles.
Yeah,
And so I think there's confusion, and I don't know whether there's any legality about it. And I think I'd like to know for sure.
So, am I understanding, so the articles will be at everybody's town hall? Are you talking about access to the articles?
No, I was talking about their being on the ballot, because it says the articles will be voted on.
well, so it's not the whole document that's voted.
Well, that's where I'm confused, and that's why I'd like a more clarification on that. Because I don't want to get them voted on and have it not right.
So the question is, are all the articles actually on the physical ballot?
Particularly the ones that are that could only be changed by a town vote.
So it's the articles to create a unified school district. So if you look at number, I'm just going to refer back to start at number 1.
And number 1 is a voter thing.
Yeah, so but there's one of the articles that's referring to, that creates a unified district. So it's essentially Article 1.
Well, could you clarify
Yeah, I
that,
would.
Ron?
But, so just so you're clear, we know all of these articles 1 through 18 are not on the ballot.
No, just the ones that the voters can change.
No, you're confusing.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think you're confused. Inez was the only one who has said that the articles need to be on the ballot for them to not be changed by.
I thought the Mr.
No.
Leopold
No.
and the other lady
Nope.
said that.
Nope, no,
Well,
I remember that.
I'll confirm it with him, but this is this Article 10 is the article, I think it's number 1, that states you're creating a unified school district. And I will confirm that with him.
and ask about the other ones and whether they have to be there or not.
Well, I know the answer. They don't have to be. He listed the ones that cannot be changed unless they have voter approval. But they're not on the ballot when you vote on March 7th.
What
That's-
makes them
I think
not be able to be changed versus others? Is there?
I don't know. He spoke to us about that.
You refer to statute.
Yeah.
I think I have that.
Well, he called them ballot questions, right?
Yes, they did call them ballot questions.
I remember that.
Okay, well,
So,
we'll get clarification.
okay. So, thanks, Jody. Anyone else like to speak at this point from the public? You guys? No? Okay. All right, guys. So, let's go ahead and approve the minutes and then talk about the process for the rest of the meeting.
Okay, I
Due
move
to
we
the-
approve the minutes of October the 5th. It's presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I have one, and I apologize, I couldn't stop at work to get my copy. There was a section where it talks about commingling of voting, that they can't be commingled, and that was in the at-large system only, they can't be commingled. And the words "at-large" weren't there, so it was just a little confusing, because I think our ruling from the state was that if it was a directly proportional model, we could,
Thank you.
we don't have to commingle. If
Right,
it's a
right,
directly
right.
proportional model, we don't have to commingle, and if it is an at-large model, we must commingle.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so when I read through the minutes, I just think if you put the words "at-large" in there somewhere, so. I have an idiot, I can't.
Do you know where she's referring?
I'm looking for it right now. So,
Does anyone have a copy of the minutes?
yeah.
No, other than you?
Yeah.
You-
In a board with proportional representation, votes for directors are not commingled prior to counting because voters of each town are selecting their representatives. In the at-large model, votes for directors are commingled prior to counting because all voters are selecting all representatives. So it says at-large. It's the second paragraph. Under the.
All right, great. I must have misread it then.
Yeah.
So you're good?
I think I'm good.
Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay, it passed, thank you. So tonight, it's already 6:30. We are going to sort of refine this agenda, I believe. We have the vote schedule in process, that's been clarified. We have ballot language in the separation agreement. We have an Article 8 discussion. We have a report on the conference, which was about equity, and equity discussion and updated data. Review schedule, and then public information, mailings and information presentations, and then State Board of Education meeting preparation. That's been there for a while, and obviously we don't need to deal with that tonight. I would suggest that we keep moving on the agenda as it is, except for the conference. We don't need to talk about that, the issues of equity, but of course we can. I don't know how much of Article 8 we want to talk about when there are so few of us in the room. But shall we start at the beginning or see how we do?
I concur, we probably don't need to talk about the conference. Do we have representatives from each of the surrounding towns?
Brattleboro, Evanston.
Putney, Guilford.
Well, to me, that's the important thing with the Article 8 discussion, because most of us from Brattleboro basically said, "Okay, it's up to you guys."
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm from Brattleboro, it's up to you guys.
Okay, so let's talk about the vote schedule and process. Do you want to speak to that, Ron, or should I start digging into it?
Why don't you start and,
So the towns, I should get out my calendar. We have 90 days to hold the vote from the time the town clerks received the letter. I think it was October 6th or 7th sometime, right, that week. So if you take 90 days, that takes us to like January 6th. So I believe in the last meeting or even the previous one, the consensus of this committee was to have the vote in January, I believe, but that really, the only option in January is the first week. The other option is sort of the end of December. That also doesn't make sense. So practically, December 13th is the date that makes the most sense.
So when did the town clerks receive the letter?
October 7th.
October 7th.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the 90 days, going out 90 days, brings it to January 5th.
Yeah.
And when we looked at the first week of January,
Yeah.
you know, it's like Tuesday is the voting day typically, but it's right after the holiday. And Barb Nowakowski checked with the town clerks. They would prefer to do it in the second full week of December,
Okay.
which would bring it to December 13th.
And this was the letter certifying the vote?
Yeah.
Vernon, okay.
And it's the notice that the town clerks needed to have.
Okay.
So if we move with that date, the articles need to be warned in the 40-30 window, and the early ballots need to be available no later than November 23rd. We also need to be aware of public information meetings, which have to happen within 10 days of the vote. And so between December 3rd and December 13th. Okay?
And we've got a more detailed calendar that we can talk about when we get down to public information mailings and all that stuff. Review the schedule.
All right. I need you to run the dates again. Early ballots
Oh, here, let me
are
do this.
available 11/23.
I've got to talk about
Okay.
it.
So does anyone have any questions about that? The logic of that vote date?
Does each town have an information meeting on this particular vote?
I believe so, yes.
Thank you.
I guess I'd just kind of point out that other than just informationally, really, at this point, this has nothing to do with us as an act, because it's not about Act 46 anymore.
I think that's.
The Vernon vote.
No, each town of the 4 remaining towns have to warn an article that, and I have the article here, and each town has to vote to support that, to release Vernon.
No, my comment was just if anybody does have any issues or commentary about this date, the date really isn't up to this.
Oh, right, oh, I'm sorry.
For just
Yeah, yeah,
keeping it
It's
to the
not-
date, yeah,
Yeah.
but the information.
We're just informing.
Yes,
It's,
yeah.
Nothing to do with this committee.
Sorry.
But what is a part of, we've already started the public information meetings, and that's part of this. I think it's like a 3-page schedule that we'll go over, that we've been working on. So shall we go, do we need to talk about the process at all, or can we move on to the ballot language?
Process specifically for the Vernon vote, or? No, I think we have process questions, like what if scenarios that we
Right.
probably need to talk about.
Yeah. But perhaps not right now.
Okay,
Does that work?
that's fine.
Okay. So we have the ballot. Do you want to pass that around? Okay. Do you have enough for the folks?
Yeah, I do. So this is two-sided, and they're two separate documents, and I'm going to give the actual 2 copies to the residents of each, or the representative from each town, so you see what it looks like. So on the side that has signatures, this side, this is just a Putney example, but you guys have your own district language. So the legal notice of Putney Town School District hereby warned and notified to meet Putney Fire Station, 10 a.m. December 13th, polls open from 10 to 7. Shall the Putney School District ratify the withdrawal of Vernon Town School District from Brattleboro Union High School District Number 6 under the terms of the withdrawal agreement approved by boards of school directors of the Vernon Town School District and the Brattleboro Union School District on October 24th. And this has to be done by Australian ballot. So Frank is getting that withdrawal agreement in copies, but it really goes to the school boards, and they ratified this warning article in each school district. And then on the other side is the actual ballot. So again, it's the same language. So Putney School District vote to ratify withdrawal of the Vernon from BUHS, and check if in favor and check if opposed.
Can we have handouts there that say, if you vote in favor, this is what it means, if you vote
I don't think you can do it the day of the vote, Australian ballot. I'm not sure if you can have public relations.
I don't think you can,
I don't think
because
so.
that was why the town clerks, when they met with us, said that it'd be nice to have a handout at the general.
Yeah.
Right. But the 10 days prior, that's when each town has to have a public information meeting. And that's when you'd really have that material.
Right.
And the Vernon reps have talked about coming to those meetings. Like 2 board members from each, 2 board members would come to each public information session just to talk about it, get support for it.
I mean, the issue's gonna be, we have a problem with attendance at those forums. I mean, I guess there's nothing we can do, but I can just see somebody who did not attend coming in and looking at this and saying, well, I have absolutely no idea what this means. And I don't know what we can do about that, but.
You know, I think it's going to be hard to get people through the door to vote. I think if they actually get through the door, they'll know what they're voting for, one would hope. So it's gonna be our job to
Okay,
get them through the door.
that's true.
No. Anything else, guys? So in front of you all is a document, it's the withdrawal agreement, which I would imagine we will get up on the WSESU website
Yeah,
at some point if we're
the two
legally.
boards met, and the signatures are getting tracked down for the clerk.
So you want to talk about the Vernon and the BUHS board? Yeah.
That's right, yes. So they have met and reviewed this document. As I say, the signatures from the various locations are getting obtained, and then this will go out to all the boards over the next couple of weeks, so that meetings can be warned according to the statute requirements.
So, do we want to take the time to read this right now? Or do we want to take this
One thing that
back and digest it?
well, yeah, I would say this is actually completely independent of the study committee's
Yeah.
work, and essentially unrelated. So it's really more of a point of information.
Yeah.
It's not really under the jurisdiction of this committee. Statutes just say if a town votes to withdraw from the union, then the other member towns shall warn the vote. So there's not much discretion there. This document is it is referenced in the article to vote. So if we do want to look at the last page, there's essentially the ballot. It's a draft ballot. What's not here is the box that would say check yes or no. Ian, this is the document you have from the earlier meeting. So it would be, for example, Article 1, shall Putney Town School District, in the blank, shall Putney, or shall Dummerston, or shall Guilford, or shall, who am I missing? Brattleboro. Yeah, Vernon's already done it, Brattleboro. Shall the Brattleboro Town School District ratify the withdrawal of the school district? And this document says, as you can see in that sentence, based on the terms of this withdrawal agreement. And so the Vernon board and the Brattleboro Union High School board had to create this document and then agree to it first. Once they do, it's a sort of a binding obligation of the districts to warn the meeting. But as I say, it's independent of whether a merger forms or not. The attorney that developed this, there was an attorney for the Brattleboro Union High School Board, Paul Giuliani, and an attorney for the Vernon Board, Mr. Slason. They agreed on the terms on behalf of both of the boards, and they created a context for this withdrawal agreement around the merger, but they could have left that entire context out. They chose to put the context in to the document. But the withdrawal is not contingent on the merger.
It is important, though, to be able to explain it to other people. So while we don't need to spend a lot of time here, because we're not responsible for this, we do all need to read it and grasp it.
Yeah, and I think, I don't have it in front of me, but the key on page 2, number 2 and 3, it's really what we talked about discharging any liability for debt and giving up the assets. And as we talked about earlier, we expected that it would be a wash, the assets versus the debt, and that's essentially what this document is confirming. So there's no negative impact on the other districts that Vernon is leaving. And there's no negative impact to them financially for their withdrawal.
Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions for Ron or Greg?
Is this ballot language by statute or
Advised by our attorney.
This is not a routine event, so
Right.
it's,
It ever happened.
yeah, there's probably not much of a precedent in terms of the document. So it does cite some, several statutes in here, but, yeah, this is the judgment of the two attorneys that developed it on behalf of the boards.
And are you referring to this ballot language that we passed around? Yeah. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a different,
But that, I mean, our attorneys,
where is it? Is this the sample on the back
Yeah,
page?
yeah.
Oh, I see, okay.
That's just because I'm responsible for it as a school board member, so I'm just
Okay.
curious how the language in my other, with my other hats.
well, they had to use the same language that's in the agreement. I think that Frank
Mhm.
referred to.
The last page.
The last page
Yeah.
of the agreement. And then check off if you're in favor or against.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right, now we're moving on to the Article 8 discussion. And
So, Frank and I spoke with Chris Leopold. We got more copies than I ever wanted. I already made copies, I forgot. I made more. So we got a couple of documents here that we'd like to refer to. You wanna speak to this? Go ahead, speak to this.
Sure, okay. So this spreadsheet document is, illustrates the proportional or the proportionality of each town relative to the federal census. And then configurations that the study committee has considered, and much of this was considered, I believe it was in January, quite some time ago. So this is just revisiting what you've already considered. I added some statistics at the bottom of the document. So the top set you've seen before, and the bottom set of statistics are simply a measure of how closely assigning people, meaning, a full, what we call it for employment, a full-time equivalent for each person relative to a calculated statistic. So for example, Brattleboro is 12,000 people in that first column out of 18,000. So that's 64% of the total vote, and this gets at the federal statute, one person, one vote. So Brattleboro is 64% of the public under a merged system without Vernon. Then if it was a 9-member board, 9 times 0.64%, is 5.8. But obviously, if you want to have 9 people, you have to do some rounding. And the state law also says that all towns will have at least one representative. So what this illustrates, and I think this is in the agreement, a 9-member board would provide for 6 Brattleboro representatives and then 1 from each of the other towns under a proportional format.
So actually, in the articles, we have the at-large.
That's
And
right.
this would be if we went proportional.
That's right.
The other thing we look at is, okay, so if we went to 11 members or 13 members, how does that kind of change the numbers? And you can see Brattleboro would have 7, Demerson and Guilford would still only have 1 each, and Putney would have 2. And then if we went to 13, Brattleboro would go up to 8, Demerson would have 1, Guilford and Putney would have 2. So you know, if you're looking at proportional, that's why I think our advice would be the 9-member board.
With the other issue that Christopher Leopold pointed out today is that the 11 board and the 13 board configuration probably would not meet the one person, one vote test, in that that's what the statistics show at the bottom. You're looking for the smallest standard deviation from the true proportion. So we're looking for the smallest number, that's why that 0.11 is highlighted. And when in the 11 board group, you see that we're off by 1% from a true statistical representation for Brattleboro, but we're off by 11% in that scenario for Dummerston, and 19% for Guilford, and then 29% for Putney. You should be looking for the least variation against the true representation, and it gets worse when you go to the 13 board. Brattleboro looks pretty good, but you've got Dummerston in that scenario underrepresented under the 13. Underrepresented for Dummerston. That's what a -25 means. It means you should have 1.33 in this 13 vote scenario, and you only have one. You see, but then you have the opposite issue in Guilford under the 13 board scenario. There's a 2 assigned, but you really should only have 1.46. That's the problem with rounding. So the 9-member board is the best scenario in terms of the deviation from the statistical calculation.
So does that mean that's what would hold up by statute?
Yes.
Does that essentially negate those other options for us, or does it just mean they'd be harder to do?
What Chris explained is when you deviate from the best scenario under a proportional vote, far from the best scenario, then the statute suggests you should consider an at-large format. And there was actually a court case Christopher referred to 40 years ago with Mount Anthony that essentially created the precedent for going to the at-large format, where they had a much greater disparity than the 9-member variation that you see in this illustration, and they went through a process to go to an at-large format so that they allowed all residents to have the opportunity for a one-person, one-vote representation. So there is one other option that we have. So we've got, Chris is saying if you couldn't find a scenario where there was a reasonable representation of the population, then your first option is to probably consider the at-large format, which you've done. The second option that you could pursue, and he did give me a reference to one system that is actually implementing it, and it is the weighted average vote. So what that means is you could actually just adopt in the articles under the 9-member board. In this example, we'll make the simple analysis. Every time you go to a board meeting under a weighted vote for a 9-member board, the Dummerston 1 vote would be 0.92. You just have a little tally sheet on the vote of any article. If necessary, if it's obviously clearly a majority, you wouldn't get into this, but the Guilford vote would be 1.01 and the Putney vote would be 1.27. Each Brattleboro vote would be 5.8 divided by 6, which is 0.97. So if there's 3 Brattleboro folks in the room, then it would be 3 times 0.97. and there's the results of your vote. So those are the three options, and you could consider under the weighted average, the different configurations, the 7, the 11, and the 13. You also could consider an even number, 8, 10, 12. There's nothing that prohibits that. It's less common, but nothing that prohibits that.
But you haven't done an 8-member board.
I actually did, and the statistical variations, the deviations are larger, so it wouldn't be a benefit from a representation point of view, but the data is actually readily available.
I have a question about the statistics. In the 13 board scenario, why would 1.46 be rounded up to 2?
Yeah.
So if you didn't, obviously you want the right-hand column to add up to 13. So if you left that at 1, who else would you increase to get to 13? Because if you...
I understand.
Yeah. Okay.
Any other questions?
It's a, I don't know, maybe it's just a theoretical question, but is there some point in the future where this per town representation is going to be not a consideration because you would be electing people to serve on a board for a much expanded district?
A unified district.
Yeah.
I think that's where all the discussion, after we first started to look at proportional voting, we went to the at-large, thinking it's a unified district, that you're all serving that district. It's kind of like the BUHS, although they still have 5 reps from Brattleboro and 1 from each surrounding town. They function as a unified board.
Are they voted at large?
No, they're not.
They're not.
They're not.
So I guess.
So, ideally, when Vernon was still in the picture, we were looking at 5 Brattleboro and 1 from each of the 4 other towns.
Do we know what the reason was for the UHS board not going with the at-large?
No, I think just when they originally formed in their charter back in 1956, whatever that was.
They probably didn't have at-large back then.
And maybe not.
And how big is the board?
9 members.
Okay, so we're talking similar
Yeah.
boards.
I do have a letter from Sean Murphy. He hoped to be here, but he couldn't be. And I know he sent this to the Guilford board. He just asked that we consider his concern. So as they get around, maybe we can take a minute to read this.
Does anyone want to read this out loud, or do you want to touch on the... Do you want to share the key points?
Yeah, I don't mind reading out loud.
Yep.
My voice isn't strong tonight, but I can try.
Sure.
Okay. Dear school board members, I would like to express an opinion on the Articles of Agreement, specifically Article 8, Board of Directors composition. An important consideration for the study committee has been to assure the towns of Putney, Dummerston, and Guilford are fairly represented on the unified board. After discussion over many meetings, the idea of a 9-member board with a representation of 3 members from Brattleboro and 1 from the 3 smaller towns, with an additional 3 at-large, would create a board that would be balanced and fair to all communities. The at-large representatives could be elected from any of the 4 towns. I have learned that the Guilford board is not in favor of this composition due to the requirement that ballots would be commingled. I appreciate the concern, however, of a greater concern to me would be the fact that Brattleboro would have 6 representatives on a 9-member board in the proportional model. I feel this way because I have been a member of the BUHS District 6 board. This board consists of 5 from Brattleboro, 1 from Putney, Dummerston, Guilford, and Vernon. It is balanced unless one of the representatives from the small town is absent. If on a proportional board, 1 member from Putney, Dummerston, or Guilford were to be absent, the larger town of Brattleboro would have the majority of 6-2. I believe that this should be avoided if possible. It is important to consider that the BUHS board is 5 and 4, and the proportional model would be 6 and 3. There is a big difference. On a unified board, all representatives advocate for all students within one district. it still does matter that each town have a strong place at the table in a balanced way. I believe that the composition as outlined in the draft Article 8 would achieve this outcome. Thank you for your time. Sincerely, Sean Murphy, Guilford.
Thoughts on Sean's letter?
So I've spoken to Sean, I think some of our other members have spoken to Sean, and I think our board certainly understands and hears both sides of this discussion. And so it's not for us a matter that we necessarily disagree with that side, it's just that we kind of like the proportional model better. And the reasons for that is the idea of losing the identity of your vote or of your representation by commingling the ballots is something that doesn't sit well with us. The idea that a town representative would be elected by folks outside of that town who may not know that individual and know what that individual stands for and know how that individual would represent their town doesn't make sense to us. It makes more sense that the individual that would be representing the town be elected by the members of that town that knows them best. And we certainly understand and can appreciate the concern with the majority of the vote, and I think we're all equally concerned with that. I think we look at it more in good faith throughout this discussion. We've been talking about the fact that we need to think about these kids as all of our kids and not segment ourselves. And so the fact that there's more people in Brattleboro sitting on the board, I guess bothers me less than the fact that I could sit as the Guilford representative knowing that I was elected by the Guilford community. I would have good faith in the majority of the Brattleboro members sitting there that they're not going to segregate out the smaller towns and and isolate us. So there is an element of good faith in it for sure. I think it comes down to the fact of representing your town and knowing that you are elected and chosen by the people of your town. So I don't know if it's okay if either of the other two Guilford members here have anything to add, but
I mean, I'll just add to Sean's letter. I had a conversation with Sean, and he was explaining that, and I asked him, Sean, have you ever had issues with Brattleboro exercising their majority? And he said it's never been an issue, that everyone acts in good faith there. It's more issues between individual philosophies on how things should be done than anything else. So I guess that sort of speaks to what Beth is saying in terms of the good faith piece. So, but I think to take one, the proportional or the at-large, you're sacrificing something else regardless. So I think, like Beth's saying, I think
and for us it came down to the idea of my comfort level with electing who the representative of Guilford or of Putney or Dummerston should be. I don't feel as though I'm the best informed to make that decision. I would think that the town of Dummerston or the town of Putney would be better situated to make that decision, not me and Guilford. Whereas I think that the members of the Guilford community would be better situated to elect me as the Guilford representative.
I feel differently, as does my board, as you guys know. So we've talked about it at length, and I spoke to Richard some today, and we're strongly in agreement. I, for one, would probably not have voted for the Articles of Agreement. I would have looked at them very differently if I'd been voting for the proportional model. I think we are going into this to represent all the kids, every single one in the 4 communities, and to break us into these 4 communities doesn't sit right with me. It sort of codifies old patterns of behavior That just seems inappropriate. I think going with the hybrid version, which is what we previously voted on, allows a much wider range of community members. Those 3 at-large members can be from anywhere. And it gives them tremendous flexibility. I would be far more interested in considering all members to be at-large if there was an alternative to what we had previously voted on. But I'm not sure if this group would want to have that conversation.
Was that a possibility?
Can you explain more about that?
So have all 9 members at large.
So,
I'm far more
Well,
comfortable with that than having, and I don't know if it's an option, than having,
so they're
6
all
and 3.
voted at large,
Right,
but
but
I think you have to have the representation from, like, a Dummerston person has to be elected
Right.
to Dummerston.
so my,
At-large voter.
regardless of what's appropriate, I'm far more comfortable in the idea, philosophically, I'm more comfortable with that
I
scenario.
kind of like your idea of all 9 members at large, and maybe hope to serendipity that of the 9, there will be at least 1 selected from each of the 3 smaller towns.
There has to be.
There has to be
Yeah.
something
So-
like yes, but again.
Yeah, I'm just speaking theoretically.
And those would be the ones that would be the designated representative for that particular town. If it ever comes to the fact that, let's say, all 9 are appointed,
Yeah.
come from Brattleboro, then of those 9, somebody's going to have to be designated as the representative for Guilford, Putney, and Dummerston.
Which
There
is
is that thought, it could happen.
But I do want to throw out that I think one of the reasons I'm so comfortable with the hybrid version is because of how it starts. We get in the door with that first person being a strong representative from that community. And that person will really set the tone of the process. I also, as we all know, and we agree, that these leadership councils are essential to what we've built. And as I shared earlier, I think that's the grooming area for these new board members. If you are a member of a leadership council, people will pay attention to that. You're learning, you've become more articulate about the process and the system. And those members of the committee are picked by the principal, but 3 of them are picked by the members of your community. So you have on-the-ground representation, and that's how the process is going to be building. And that's how I
The other thing I think about, it speaks to your point, Beth, that, and I might paraphrase it the wrong way, but don't think that another townspeople knows their town rep the best. I think that's probably true the first vote. But as the board starts functioning and works, I think Guilford people, or anybody throughout the district, would know that this Guilford rep is doing a really good job for the unified board. And it, so it's not just the Guilford voting body, it's everyone. And I think about like the BUHS board, if it was at large, I think people would look at those outlying town reps and say, they're doing a really good job representing their town, or not. And, so it's going to be voted on at large through all the districts, but because the board is functioning for all the districts. I don't know. So I think the first year, I agree with your concept. I think after that, I don't know.
I can also think of a situation where you may have 2 Guilford people running that have very different philosophies and ideas. And, the entire town of Guilford may vote for the one that they like, and yet the greater population could vote for the other one that does not represent how Guilford feels, and that person could still end up on the board. And so that possibility to me, it makes me uncomfortable, because then Guilford would be being represented by somebody who doesn't share Guilford's philosophies.
But they, I'm playing devil's advocate.
Sure.
But you would have your leadership council speaking to the unified board,
Right.
and they might, if that person was elected and doesn't represent the town's views, then it's gonna be pretty obvious, based on the input from the leadership council, that that person is not aligned with.
And you would hope that
Yeah.
that person would vote reflective of the leadership council, although they already know of it.
But I'm thinking of the other members on the unified board.
Sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so.
Speaking to Beth's point, I own a business in Brattleboro, so I'm, more known in Brattleboro than a lot of Dummerston residents. Does that mean that I would be as fit to represent Dummerston? But I'm more people, it's name recognition. I'm in the middle of the alphabet, and so that's gonna dictate how, and would that be the right thing if I'm a representative of Dummerston, which the statute provides representation? That's my first point. I think that we're asking our town voters to give up a lot of town identity in all this process. And in our forums, people were pretty upset. This was before commingling came about, looking at the at-large model. People were really interested in knowing knowing that their representative was still going to represent them. And I think it's a transitional issue. If you want people to get on board and look at the good side of this, the bad side can't be a complete loss of identity for some people in small towns. Also in our town, so that was even before the commingling. I think once we had commingling, we're all going to go vote, or maybe we've already voted, and I know how my town voted, even though whoever wins represents all Americans, and I think it's a concept people understand. I think we're also in this at-large system going into uncharted territory, because we've had a BUHS board, and that's constantly what people have been able to think about and say it functions well. We're very happy with how our high school performs, and we all understand how that works. When you start to talk about at-large systems, people don't understand what that is. I think there are very few places doing it. Given how long it took for the AOE to get a response on the commingling ballots, I think we're in sort of an area that not many other places do, whereas people understand weighted or not a directly proportional model. And because of that, I have some concerns that I have gleaned from various attorneys speaking that the statute provides representation, and if it's voted on by Brattleboro, that person by law has to represent the people of Brattleboro. So therefore, if the person's being elected by the at-large, they can't actually represent the small town. And I'm a little bit lost on that point, but I'm concerned because this isn't done very often that it isn't actually, this at-large system doesn't comply with how things need to be set up for representation.
I thought we got an answer to that.
We did.
Latter one from Secretary of State Condos.
It's also clear that members of the board are representing the 4 towns. We know that.
Even though it says we all have a representative, Dummerston has a representative.
Well, it has a resident, I don't think the word is representative.
Yeah.
It's
I
like
think
you're
we've talked
creating
through
a
this
separate.
before.
Okay. It's like you're creating a new voting entity that comprises, the towns that make up Brattleboro, Dummerston, Guilford, Putney. That is now a new voting entity.
Well, I don't think the statute reads that Dummerston has a resident that has to be on the board. It says Dummerston has a representative. And I think therein lies the problem. I don't think this has been litigated or anything, but I think that's the question. Because Dummerston has a representative.
What is it?
They have to be a resident.
Yeah,
Resident, yes.
each town has to have a minimum of 1 representative from its town on.
From its town.
Yeah.
Is it from or for? Just
From.
the end?
No,
From. Has to be a resident.
Right.
Must be a resident.
I thought we were making stuff up here, but that's okay.
Yeah, even if, so the thing where this was tested was the Mount Anthony system, and what precipitated it was things like the town of Woodford had 1% of the vote, but they had, I don't know, 10% of, so 1% of the proportion of residents, but they had 10% of the vote. You know, so, but if you're a really tiny town, the state law says that's the way it's going to be. But other towns who had much more than the minimal one representative, like in our example, it would be Brattleboro, where we have 64% in the Brattleboro town having the proportion of the vote. In the Bennington system, this is Mount Anthony Union, it was something like they had 68% of the population, but they had 30% of the board vote. That along with Woodford having 1% of the population, but having 10% of the vote, and then the other towns having the same imbalance, there was simply very little correlation between proportion of population and the effect at the Union High School board vote. So they established this at-large methodology that's been in place for a very long time, and I haven't heard any news articles. And Chris Leopold said today there really hasn't been any substantive court review of the issue you're raising. A feeling of inadequate representation regarding an at-large format. So for 35 years it's been in place and hasn't triggered a review. So it does seem like the at-large is well tested, but I think you're probably right. I don't know, but just my general familiarity is that the proportional vote is more common, just because there are so many separate towns in Vermont.
I do know that there's an at-large system in Chittenden County, which has been in Vermont Digger recently, saying that that's not, they're contesting that, saying that that's not.
Is it an old one or a new one?
It's been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So that at-large system in our state is sort of in the legislature is coming under fire. So that has me a little hinky that we're going along and doing this, given that people are saying it's not legal in the Vermont House. So.
Well, our legal counsel is telling us that it is legal. So do we want to take a vote on this? We've got 5 voting members. Or do we want to,
Personally, I'd rather have everybody here. I feel like, we've all worked on this together for quite a while now, and it would be important to have everybody participate.
That's where I was leaning at the beginning, but you suggested going ahead and doing it. Do you feel differently now, or are you in agreement with Amy?
I feel the exact same way I felt before, which is that it's up to the towns. I don't think Brattleboro has, I don't think it makes a difference to Brattleboro which way we go on this. So as a Brattleboro representative, I'm however they want to handle it.
And I would say that Guilford's position isn't as strongly as it sounds as though yours. I think all of us would still have voted for we did already vote for the articles and in the at-large model. Of course, not understanding the complexities of it at the time, but still, now that I do, I still would vote for the articles, given that. I just think it's important to note that that's our opinion or our feeling of it.
From Dummerston's perspective too, I've spent quite a bit of time talking with different Dummerston residents that have kids in the school. When I don't know if I presented it too simplistically or not, but I've explained to them that we have, 2 models. We've got the proportional and a hybrid, and told them that, the proportional, Dummerston would get 1 seat on the 9-member board, and you could see the vote of the town would be very clear. In the hybrid model, the vote would not be clear. because everybody would be voting on all the representatives. And there would be a potential for Dummerston to have more than one rep. And all of them have said they would rather have more than one rep, given the choice between the two. So I'm really torn, because I know the Dummerston board has said they support the proportional model. It wasn't a unanimous vote, but, it's, I guess I would appreciate more time to think about it.
Okay, all right. Okay.
So we'll
Good,
keep this on the, we haven't set another meeting, right?
No, but we need to.
Probably.
All right,
Can I
so,
ask a question, like my hand raised a long time ago? At one, Frank, if you had a member board, what would be Brattleboro's rep? Would it just move up one
Let me look at that.
from the 7? So would it be 5 members to
Yeah.
3?
Yeah, it'd be 5-1-1-1.
Which to me sounds even better.
What was the question?
If you had an 8-member board.
Oh.
And I don't foresee any problems on a board with different towns like this coming to a tie. I really see people agreeing like the high school board generally does.
We started out with the 8-member board, and then went, we had the 9. What did we start?
We had the 9 and
9, and then
Vernon.
Vernon left, and so we went to 8, and then we got to thinking, 8's an even number, so, yeah, and that's how we ended up back at the 9 again. So, 8 was discussed.
It just seems to me that that would be more proportional, and I've had people from Brattleboro, other board members from Brattleboro saying that that would be probably more equal for the smaller towns versus Brattleboro.
It would take away the automatic supermajority, correct?
Yes.
I mean, in that argument, 7's even better.
Well, 7's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just
So-
worry that when we start looking at board members representing their school-based councils, you get too few members and there's not enough people to,
Yeah.
it's a huge amount of work.
yeah.
So on the 8-member, the other issue there is certainly possible, the standard deviation is a 0.13, a little higher than the 9-member. But what that means is when you look at the individual differences, you can just see it, probably intuitively when you consider that it's Brattleboro, which is almost perfectly represented under an 8-member board in that their statistic, 64% times 8 is 5.15, and if they have 5 members, there's very little variance. That's a good thing. But all the other towns have quite a bit of a variance. So the quick numbers are Dummerston, the statistic is 0.82, and if you have 1, that's a 23% variance. It's pretty high. Then Guilford, so you have 1 vote, but the statistic is 0.9, so that's 11% variance. And then Putney, you've got the 1 vote, but your statistic is 1.13. So that's a 12% variance. So that's why the standard deviation is higher. Not a problem though if you go to the weighted vote. So again, if you said, well, you want the 8-member board, you just say, well, Putney's at 1.13 every time that 1 person votes. Guilford's a 0.9 every time that 1 person votes. In Brattleboro, it's 5.15 divided by 5, so it's very close to 1 person, 1 vote.
Okay, shall we move on? I want to touch base on a conference Ron, Frank, and I went to because it was very much in tune with what we've been talking about. So I just want to take a moment. It was the Vermont Superintendents Association, Vermont School Board Association last week at Lake Maury. It was a 2-day conference, and it was called Fulfilling the Promise of Equity. I'm going to encourage all the members of this committee to take a look at the Vermont School Board Association website. just to get a sense of what that conference was about, because we have been talking about equity since the beginning of this process and been flummoxed as to how to articulate what equity is, as has the AOE, which was clear from the conference. So I don't want to dig into this too much, because I do think that if a new board was created, they will be very much focused on this topic. But for the folks who are listening, you could also go to this website and take note of two key people who spoke. One was Robert, or I don't know, it was Andrew Hargreave, who's an educator, sort of an international educator. He's a Brit. He currently teaches at Boston College, and he was a pretty exciting speaker, and teaches, really speaks to teachers, getting teachers excited. The other person was a woman named Robin Wright, who was there with someone else from her organization. It was Kirwan. It's a Kirwan Institute. And she talked about equity and implicit bias. And implicit bias is something we're all pretty familiar with, I would imagine. And she really talked about it in the context of race. But and that's an issue for those of us here in Vermont. A very big issue, but I think in terms of implicit bias, what we're seeing in our schools is that there's a tremendous amount of poverty. And that is definitely at play in all of our schools. And she was clear that it's not a moral issue. We all have implicit bias. But in order to actually address it, you need to think about it and recognize it and own it. So I do think that's worth exploring for all of us as we process. And that you were going to read.
Well, the other person that spoke, he introduced one of the days, I think it was the second day, Stephen Morse, the chair of the State Board of Education. And his remarks on equity in Act 46 were really powerful. I talked to Stephen afterwards. He is willing to come to a Act 46 presentation. He is available November 15th on the next one that we have.
Which is in Dummerston.
So I would want us to talk about that and confirm whether we want to invite Stephen. I think it would be really good to hear from him.
And we talked at the beginning of this process, last November of October, of inviting him.
All right.
So shall we go ahead and do that? See if he's available? Okay, great.
He's available, so he just wanted to confirm that the study committee felt it would be appropriate.
That was in Dummerston?
Yes,
Yes.
And what date?
November 15th.
So may I,
Go ahead.
so did the AOE embrace now that equity means equity in terms of socioeconomic issues in results? No, we didn't get that far.
I don't think they gave
From
us
the
a
flyer, I
definition.
thought that was going to be the answer. I was very excited.
I think
They were struggling with that.
Alice asked the point blank question, what's your definition of equity? But what is very clear is that they are saying it's moved up. If it's not the number one focus for them, it will be. And they shared a lot of data around the disparity between income and student outcomes, and yet not so much that it's just a straight correlation. The mass of data says that higher poverty, lower student outcomes, but the range it also shows that there's very high outcomes with very high poverty. There are the counter statistics that are not just one or two, like the Academy School we've talked about with that PICA study, but many schools. So the point is that they know that we can deal with poverty and have great outcomes, but we don't do it in the state of Vermont, and they're very concerned about that. And so they showed the outliers on both ends of the spectrum in the data that we reviewed, meaning the other end is high income, very low student outcomes. So those conditions exist throughout the state in many schools. They had a dot for every school in the state around proficiency in math, and they had it on a graph. And they're saying we know how to create. We know how to bring the solution to the program, to the student. We're not doing it very well in the state.
I think that data's on Digger as
Yes.
well.
It's
Digger
great.
has it's interactive on Digger, which is really lovely for understanding that.
Yeah, and we have a lot of information and slides, which we will share, figure out how to make that happen.
I was just questioning the November date for Dummerston, because don't we have a forum coming up in November?
That's the thing.
That's the 15th.
Oh, that's going to be a hugely full.
Well, his remarks were probably 10, 15 minutes. And they fit really well with the PowerPoint that has been presented in other districts, Guilford and Brattleboro Town so far. And I think we'd like to use some of the slides that Rebecca Holcomb presented on equity.
It would be nice to get his feedback, given we're going to submit a report again very soon to that body, and he's the chair, so I don't think he's going to give us an opinion on our report at that meeting, but certainly it will give the committee and the public a good sense of what are the priorities, what's the criteria that the board will be bringing to our study committee review.
How can we access from this website? What do you look for when you?
It'll be, right now it's the banner on the first page. And I would imagine they'll keep that active for a little bit longer.
Thank you.
Okay, so can we move on? Just so we are going to update some of the data to 2016, more active 2016 numbers, and we'll have to figure out over the next couple weeks what to do. Can we review the schedule? So this is a draft. And when this is finalized, we'll put it up on the website. Do we have enough to go?
Yep.
around? So we've got one date that's set for the vote, December 13th, and then this possible vote in March. Our intention was to have, it's my recollection, and what I've been working on is that we would have at least 2 informational presentations to each town before the first vote, and we're chipping away at that. We've done that in Guilford, and we've done it in Brattleboro. And so this is a tentative schedule of some other dates. I haven't looked at this. I know several people have worked on it today. So no doubt there are, little edits in it that are needed and dates to be reviewed, which is what we're doing now. But what we have in here is, in addition to the actual potential dates of meetings, when we will be submitting articles to the Reformer, talking on the radio, interviews with WTSA and KVT, potentially talking to select boards, and those information sessions, which have to be within 10 days of the vote. So I'd like us to just take a gander at the schedule up to December 13th and not really spend too much time beyond that.
Up where?
Stay within the context of the first vote.
Yeah.
So Ron, I think you were the most recent person to work on this. Did you?
Yeah, I added some things about the, it's later on, related to the Vernon vote. But I would want study committee reps on the first and second page to look at your school board dates. Now, as an example, the week of 11/7, November 7th. Putney on 11/3 will have a public information session. So is that a study committee public information?
Yes, so those are all, study committees occasionally have happened on the same evenings as school board meetings. They are separate meetings. They are not, they sometimes happen in the middle in a break of another meeting, but they are their own meeting.
So like the next
yeah.
date, November 13th, Barb will make sure that the articles are warned within the 40 to 30 day window, so we don't have to worry about that, but it's there listed. The next one, November 15th, we have the Dummerston Public Information meeting. Looks like we have a proposed, so that next, page 2, that 11:15 is the same, that's just carried over Stephen
Yeah.
Morse. Now, it has 7:15, I would say, I should have changed that to 6 PM, because that's when the study committee session
Right,
starts.
right. I didn't know if we'd do the presentation first.
No, I'd want him to
Okay.
speak. Question?
Oh, okay, so are we having a work session, or is that work session just him talking?
No, that is a public information session.
Right,
So it's on the bottom of page 1,
yeah, I see that.
and then it shows up again,
Yes, that
and it
needs to
says
be
work
edited.
session, it shouldn't be, so,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
it's still the information section.
It looked like we were having a work session
Yeah,
after the.
I know,
forum.
Yeah,
so
it's
that's, I'll change
Yeah, it
that.
needs to be edited, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so these are the things that we need to kind of pay attention to.
So it looks, so just to go back, can we get the first Dummerston presentation, then Steve Morse, then the second Putney,
Yeah,
if that works for everyone? I have to pass that by. Well, I guess we could just commit to that now. And then second Brattleboro, the following 2 weeks later after Thanksgiving. Guilford, I tentatively put you for the second Guilford public information on the 6th, which would actually also be, could act as the public information, the official.
Right.
But same, do you follow
where
my?
is that?
Sorry, all the way, the week of 12/5. And then the second Dummerston sometime in that week as well, would also, which again, actually, no, that doesn't, yeah, that doesn't.
Yeah,
because it's after
so
the-
those we're gonna have to really check, because based on that calendar that I sent around to a few of you, that window for the 10 days within the public
Yeah.
vote for Vernon has to be essentially December 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, or 12th.
Well, Barb said the 10th day starts on the 12th. Is that not?
That's the last day. It starts on the 3rd.
Right, sorry. So the 6th is fine for Guilford.
Yeah.
Yeah. And is there a Dummerston date during that week?
I don't
Well,
think so.
I think we'd have to look at it on the 6th.
We could do double duty?
Could you do Guilford on the 5th, since that's when we have a regular meeting?
Yeah, that's the idea.
The 6th. I think that's why I said 5th, which is a,
On Monday, is that
Yeah.
what you
That
So
would be our
12/5 would be Guilford,
regular- Yeah.
okay.
12/6 ideally would be Dummerston. 12/7 would be, no, Wednesday would be Brattleboro Town. And then 12/8 would be Putney.
So that's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday?
Yeah, so those are the 4. And so any of these proposed select board meetings, I don't know if it could be joint meetings.
And that's just a suggestion. Okay.
So I guess my main point is, we don't have much flexibility on those public information meetings. And if we stick with your regular board days, like Beth, you were saying with Guilford on Monday the 5th,
Yeah.
that would be important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you saying these are going to be the select board meetings? They all say
They
select
could
board.
be combined. This is very rough, Jody. This is for discussion right now, and will be a working document over the next month. I will throw out that not all of us, as previously discussed, are going to need to attend every one of these meetings, but you need to commit to some of them. So I'm gonna, since some people haven't been able to or not chosen not to attend, I'm gonna hunker down on you guys and have you commit. Because some of us are doing some serious heavy lifting here, and we all need to
Going
spread it
back
out.
to the beginning of the schedule, one thing that is missing is the, any info for the general election. Preparation of something for the town clerks to hand out.
Say more about that.
because it's a good time to do it.
Right, they're gonna have a lot of people going through,
Oh, for the October.
yeah, and just explaining what
November,
the 12, 13,
Yeah.
December 13th vote means.
It's a
So
good
that's
idea.
week of
Yeah.
November 17th, if we, no, it's the week before, so it's a
Sort
separate.
of like a copy of the PowerPoint at a minimum, but the brochure you have,
Yeah, or a
Just a
handout.
single
Well,
page.
But,
Letting them know about the date.
Yeah.
Save the date.
and if it's specific about the Vernon vote, then I don't think we have any publication specific to that.
Right.
I think Vernon intended to have something developed. Their last board, at that joint meeting, I thought they said they were mindful of that, but I don't know.
Yeah, so it'd be good to find out if you can, I mean, it's kind of like a shortened version of the withdrawal agreement, and then the rationale as to why they were withdrawing.
And so do we also want to create a document explaining and then share that with our school boards and let them pass it out if they,
I
think
like
it's
the
the-
idea of like a document that on one side tells you what happens if you vote yes, and on the other side, what happens if you vote no. Just like a one-page thing.
So if people want to start working on that and share it
did you put
around.
up your hand?
I don't mind working on it, but I don't know the answer to the question. What happens if it votes no
On the Vernon?
on the Vernon? Like, I don't know.
I have a question. Why are we getting involved in informing people about the Vernon vote?
Because each district needs to vote to.
Yeah, but like you
support it.
said, Vernon's working on it, it's their vote. Shouldn't
It's
this
less
come
than-
from that?
I think it's not really an Act 46 thing, it's a school board thing, I think, right? Like, the school board would have an interest in helping with that, because it does impact us. Not so much the Act 46 committee, although some of us are on, well, we're all on both, right? But I think,
The boards are signing off on the vote,
yeah,
so they're intimately involved
I
in
think
the process.
you would participate in that more from a board standpoint, not an Act 46 standpoint, I think.
Yeah, but except, it's the Act 46 group that understands the implications, or will understand the implications if one town doesn't support it.
Yeah.
Well, it's definitely tied to the March vote, so it's directly linked. If the Vernon vote doesn't pass in one of the towns, then the study committee would have to revisit the merger, the March merger, so they're definitely directly linked. Even though it's a statutory requirement for the towns to warn it and vote it regardless.
Beth, do you want to come up with a draft and work on it with
Yeah.
Frank, perhaps? And then,
Sure.
we do
A
need
lot
to
of the
schedule
basis
the
is
next
from the
meeting.
withdrawal agreement, and then we can talk to Vernon about, the points that they used, I think, during their August 9th election. So they had flyers for that, so we can get that
Yeah.
information. So I'll add a date about public relations on November 8th at election site.
Can we determine when our next
Yeah.
meeting is, work session is? Do
The
you
only,
have-
the only other thing I want to point out on this thing is on page 3, so people start thinking about it. I think I have it under the week of December 26th. Petitions will be available in town offices for the unified board members to take out petitions. So that's still a ways off, December 26th. But, people had asked earlier, so when do they get their, take their
Yeah.
petitions out? And then I think there's a date somewhere,
January 30th,
January
last
30th,
day to file.
petitions must be submitted.
Okay, so we need to educate folks who might be running for that board now, and we really should be doing that at the presentations, right? Okay, something to build into the presentations.
Okay.
Okay.
So I would ask you, if you see something on here like we already found, that's like a question, just send it to us. On the last page, there is that document that I had referred to earlier about the December vote. Well, actually, no, it's actually for the March 7th vote, those deadlines.
I have a question that's kind of related to schedule, but also to process. The March vote will be voting on the merger and electing representatives. What about the budget? We won't be voting on a budget? 'Cause
No.
I didn't know, do we need to be like preparing?
We are with the boards.
Right, so
We're preparing individual budgets
budgets.
with the
Okay.
concept that there's not going to be a huge difference if the merger goes through.
You just add.
We're just kind of meld those budgets together, and it's not going to,
Okay,
it's like a 2-year process for this special ed consolidation.
right,
Kind
okay.
of that's what happened.
But then we wouldn't be voting on that in March?
No.
Okay.
No. Well, you'll be voting on your individual budgets.
Right, the individual budgets,
Yeah, but not a unified
because we
budget.
won't know if
Yeah.
we needed to.
Yeah.
So that would happen, if the merger went through in March, would there have to be a vote later on to approve budget?
Chris,
We'd have to look at that.
yeah.
Something to add to that.
Yeah, I don't see that as a problem.
Okay, can we talk about our next meeting?
Yeah.
You tell us when we can have it, Ron, because we're,
All right.
when
like
do you
in
have
2
it,
weeks?
friends? We might have 2.
Like in about 2 weeks?
10th of November?
The week of the 8th, who's meeting that week?
The general election.
Oh, yeah, we're not gonna do that.
Really early in the
Everybody
morning?
keeps forgetting that for some reason.
9th is wide
Trying
open.
to.
The 10th is wide open.
What
Or do you
days?
want to tie it to a board meeting?
No, we don't need to.
No.
Because you have information meetings those sessions, so I would say either the 9th or the 10th.
Does the people have a preference? So the 9th is a Wednesday.
Yep.
Wednesday and Thursday.
Let's do the 9th.
Okay, that's my preference too.
With a snow day on the 10th.
Sure.
Yeah.
Don't even think that.
Hey, people are already texting me about snow days tomorrow.
Well, you're the one that's gotta get up at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Mark, you shouldn't do that during the meeting.
Do we, shall we go ahead and tentatively reserve a second work session?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Wait, where is the one on the 9th?
I'll look if we can do the Career Center again.
I like the thing.
Good,
Tuesday.
good.
Deputy syndrome?
That's what I'll look for. And you want to do one like a couple weeks after?
Yeah, so I want to make sure that so the next looming concern in terms of deadline is probably these petitions and the petition language. Is that right, Frank or Ron? So I just want to make
We will have
sure.
the petition language.
Okay, I just want to make sure we build that into our, I don't want to lose track of that for folks.
What's the date on those? December 26th? Yeah, December 26th, so we got some time.
Okay,
But so if we looked at, we say 2 weeks after, that's the week before Thanksgiving. Let's say either the 22nd or you go to the next week.
Go to the next week.
So the week of the 28th,
what about the 30th?
30th is wide open.
Okay, everyone?
Works, sure.
Another night of fun.
Is Thursday bad for other, is Thursday not as good as Wednesday? Okay,
They're really all bad.
I know.
Let's not spin
Thursday
it.
1st, are people asking about Thursday? The
I was
1st?
asking, but if.
Do you have a preference?
I would prefer Thursday, but I can make Wednesday work. It's not critical, but if it doesn't really matter, then I guess I would prefer Thursday.
Let's do the 1st, since you're,
So
yeah.
12/1,
So December 1st.
Okay, everyone?
Sure.
and we're keeping the November 9th.
Yeah,
Yeah.
At the Career Center again?
I'll try to book both of those.
Okay. So, next thing on the agenda is the State Board of Education meeting prep, which we're not gonna touch quite yet. I wanna, since we're almost done, I wanna quickly touch on how much Barb Nowakowski has been helpful in the last year of this process. She's incredibly responsive and really organized, and she's greatly appreciated.
So just so the public knows, Barb Nowakowski is the secretary, the executive secretary to the superintendent's office. And she is a great asset to not only this Act 46 study committee, all the boards, and really a lot of the functions within the central office and throughout the district. So,
and she, not only does she maintain the schedule of meetings and all the things that need to get done, she pays attention to the voting schedule, which is immensely important, and she does it flawlessly. So thank you, Barb. And she's a very nice person. Anything else? Oh, yes, right.
What?
We're heading towards the end of the meeting. Anything else before we open it up to public comment?
I
Mark?
think they had their talk.
No, they get another opportunity.
Why?
All right.
Mark, you're trying to shut me up.
No, I know.
All right.
Jody, I would never do that to you.
No, dear.
I encourage you, I love your melodious tones there. The highlight of every meeting I go to.
So does anyone have anything they'd like to share? Jody?
Well, I just had a question because it just dawned on me that I had looked for the minutes and they weren't on the web today from your last meeting. And so, I haven't seen them. And I didn't think of that when you were passing the minutes and stuff. And just encourage everybody, because I find this with a lot of the other boards are not getting their minutes on in time. So just encourage everybody.
Yeah, so there are several people at the central office who are responsible for doing that. And if someone is out sick or something, there's a day or two that, yeah. So I'm sure that will go up very soon. But yes, we should all acknowledge that it's essential that they go up. Anything more? Anything else? All right, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second? Oh, all right, all those, any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? No, thank you, everyone. Be safe.